So the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship via a showdown for the ages, and in today's video I'm going to break down several of their previous matchups, including the Chiefs' loss from earlier this season, and explain why I think they will win this one. I'll look at a couple key areas the Chiefs have a potentially scary advantage over the Bills that could make or break this game. So let's talk about it, but first, how about those? Alright, so we all know by now that the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be facing off once again in the playoffs, this time for the AFC Championship game. This is going to be the fourth time in the Mahomes and Allen era that these guys have faced off, with KC getting the better of Buffalo all three times so far, and I'm freaking stoked for this game because in order for the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl, they've got to go against the only team that beat them in the regular season, one of the best teams in the entire NFL in either conference. And yeah, the Chiefs did lose to the Broncos Week 18, but that comes with a huge asterisk attached with the Chiefs resting their key starters. And there's plenty to talk about regarding this matchup, but that obviously meant the Bills ended up besting the Ravens in Buffalo on Sunday in their highly anticipated divisional round matchup. I'm sure most of you, like me, watched that game pretty stress-free, knowing that the Chiefs already handled the Texans, and man, it was a pretty wild game that basically went down to the wire. I covered this game in depth in my divisional recap video on my second channel, so check that out here if you haven't or you want to know more about it. But basically, the Ravens had 2 turnovers in the first half to help give Buffalo a pretty favorable 21-10 lead heading into the third quarter. But then the Ravens scored 9 unanswered points, a field goal and a touchdown, yet failed the 2-point conversion to tie it. Buffalo then managed 2 more field goals after another Ravens turnover to go up 8 with under 4 minutes to go. Lamar led a pretty solid 8-play, 88-yard touchdown drive to make it a 2-point game, and failed the 2-point conversion attempt again. Mark Andrews dropped the pass, and it was officially over. I will point out that even if the Ravens converted that 2-point conversion to tie it, the Bills still had a minute and a half left on the clock and 2 timeouts. So who knows, maybe Josh Allen gets them in field goal range after that, and the Bills would end up winning that anyway. This was an interesting game to me because honestly, the Ravens appeared to be the better team, but the Bills executed at a higher level, making less mistakes. That's how we've seen the Chiefs win so many games. It's not a knock to Buffalo, but I mean, the Ravens turned the ball over 3 times and still almost tied it up right there near the end. So no turnovers in this one, and Baltimore probably wins, but Lamar Jackson threw an awful interception. Then on the very next drive, he fumbled and Buffalo recovered, turning that into a touchdown. Then in the third quarter, Mark Andrews fumbled and of course dropped the 2-point conversion pass from Lamar. 2 veterans, too many mistakes. You have to play a clean game, especially in the playoffs against a team as good as the Buffalo Bills, where it's win or go to Cancun. And with that, the AFC Championship game is the Bills and Chiefs on Sunday evening, with the winner of that game playing the winner of the earlier Sunday game, the NFC Championship, Commanders and Eagles, in Super Bowl 59. KC and Buffalo faced off in the Conference Championship once before in 2021, where KC handed it to them 38-24. The next time these two teams played in the playoffs was that wild 2022 divisional round 13-second game. The game where Josh Allen brought the Bills up 36-33 with just 13 seconds left in the game. And in those 13 seconds, the Chiefs went 2 plays, 44 yards, and were able to kick a 49-yarder to tie it and force overtime. KC then won the coin toss and scored a touchdown on that drive to Travis Kelce, which ultimately ended the game. That caused Josh Allen to never be able to step out on the field like Patrick Mahomes back in the AFC Championship game years prior against Tom Brady and the Patriots. Well, since that game, the rules for overtime have changed in the playoffs. If a team scores a touchdown first, that's no longer the end of the game like it would be in the regular season. Instead, in the playoffs, the other team gets a chance to match that with a touchdown drive of their own. If that happens, the next score wins, no matter which team it's from. If they don't match that first overtime touchdown with a touchdown of their own, though, it's game over. The most recent matchup between these two teams in the playoffs was in Buffalo last year. Mahomes and company played their first ever road playoff game and actually had the opportunity to go up 10 points in the fourth quarter, but Mecole Hardman fumbled on 1st and goal on a jet sweep, which resulted in a touchback Bills ball at the 20 to keep things a 3-point game. Well, long story short, back and forth a few drives later, their kicker Tyler Bass missed a 44-yard attempt wide right, which resulted in a Bills loss rather than being able to tie the game. But the past is the past. These teams are completely different, and none of that matters. And from here, I want to dive into some injuries from the Bills game that are going to make things a bit more favorable for the Chiefs offense after I go over the last time these two teams played each other earlier on this season. But first, if you want to make your nutrition goals easier than ever by having fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals shipped right to your front door, then look no further than to the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Factor helps you take the stress out of meal planning, allowing you to skip the grocery store's prep work and cooking fatigue. And that's a big reason why I've happily been enjoying them for well over a year now. These chef-crafted meals are not only delicious, but they are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. That's perfect for my busy lifestyle because the faster I get upstairs and eat a quality lunch, the more time and energy I have to make content for all of you. It also helps that there's over 35 meals to choose from each week, like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie, and also more than 60 add-ons from breakfast to juices, smoothies, and much more. This go-round, I got more keto meals since I typically eat pretty low carb, and the chicken Florentine might have been my favorite of the lot, but the Tex-Mex beef bowl is always fire, and the black pepper and sage pork chop was also fantastic. I mean, it was all good if I'm gonna be honest. And if you want to eliminate the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning up and enjoy great meals like these, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50HBTC to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50HBTC at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, the last time these two teams faced off against each other, the Bills handed KC their only loss of the regular season. And again, that's with the Broncos game aside. The week leading up to the game, Harrison Butker suffered a knee injury that week during practice, and Spencer Schrader kicked in his stead, making all 3 of his extra points. Wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster returned after missing several weeks with a hamstring injury. Meanwhile, wide receiver Hollywood Brown and cornerback Jalen Watson were still out on injured reserve. Then, defensive end Charles Omenihu and running back Isaiah Pacheco's 21-day window to return from IR was open, but they did not return to play against the Bills. DeAndre Hopkins was on the team by then, playing in his 4th game and still getting acclimated, but the Chiefs weren't the only team missing players. The Bills were down there starting right tackle Spencer Brown, as well as 2 pass catchers and wide receiver Keon Coleman, wrist, and tight end Dalton Kincaid, knee. Linebackers Matt Milano and Balin Spector were also on injured reserve at that time. They're going to be back for this one. But all that to say, both of these teams, even back in November, are not the same, and I'll get into some favorable differences for KC for this Sunday, but first, it's worth talking about that Week 11 game. Mahomes threw an interception at the beginning of the game on 2nd and 3 while trying to force a pass to Noah Gray, and that turned into a James Cook rushing touchdown. Josh Allen also threw a costly interception as well in the first half on 4th down. He got picked off by Chamari Connor, and that turned into a Noah Gray touchdown. So both quarterbacks had a turnover in the first half that turned into a tutty. Xavier Worthy started heating up in this game, catching 4 passes and a touchdown in 1 drive in the first quarter. However, after Mahomes targeted Worthy deep downfield in the second quarter and Worthy couldn't stay in bounds, he was never targeted again the rest of the game. The second half started out with the Bills up 16-14, and after 4 straight punts, 3 back-and-forth touchdowns ended up happening, with the third essentially ending the game. That was when the Bills were up by just 2 points at KC's 26-yard line. They had just over 2 minutes to go and were facing a 4th and 2. Well, instead of kicking it to go up by 5, they made the right call to not allow Mahomes back out there down by less than 1 score with a chance to rally another infamous game-winning drive. And on that play, the Chiefs surprised Buffalo by playing zone coverage. Meanwhile, the Bills called a man coverage beater. Well, the problem was, for whatever reason, KC had no spy on Josh Allen, and he did what was kind of predictable, used his legs, putting on his superhero cape and willing himself into the end zone to go up by 9, making that a 2-score game and therefore basically game over. Mahomes threw an interception on the next drive on a prayer pass to Kelce on 4th and 13, and that was all she wrote. Bills got the W. They were 9 for 15 on 3rd down, 1 for 2 on 4th down, with that 1 conversion being the Josh Allen touchdown near the end. In Kansas City, they were just 5 for 10 on 3rd down and 0 for 1 on 4th. They only had 1 more drive, talking about the Bills, but they dominated the time of possession by nearly 9 minutes. The Chiefs were an impressive 3 for 3 in the red zone, but Buffalo not far behind 3 for 4 in the red zone, all rushing touchdowns, by the way. The Chiefs' defense was great against the run, allowing just 20 yards on 9 carries by James Cook. But again, all 3 touchdowns came on the ground, and Allen was one of them. He was their leading rusher on the day, 12 carries for 55 yards, but 26 of those came from that 4th and 2 touchdown run. Where most of the success came for Allen in that offense, though, was through the air by basically targeting non-Trent McDuffie players in the secondary. I mean, just look at this. Trent McDuffie allowed 1 reception for 1 yard. But then Justin Reed, he allowed 4 catches on 4 targets for 34 yards. Nick Bolton allowed 4 catches on 5 targets for 20 yards. Chamari Connor allowed 5 on 6 targets for 55 yards. He did have that interception, but on top of that, missed a couple tackles as well. And then Najee Johnson allowed 9 catches on 12 targets for 103 yards and a touchdown. KC's D-line also sacked Josh Allen 0 times and allowed him to go 27 of 40 for 262 yards, 1 touchdown, and that 1 weird interception that Allen threw. I don't even know why he threw it there. Anyway, the Chiefs defense also allowed 6 different 3rd and longs to be converted. You had a 3rd and 6 that went for 30 yards, a 3rd and 9 for 15 yards, a 3rd and 8 for 15 more yards, a 3rd and 9 that went for 10 yards, and then 2 more 3rd and 9s got converted due to defensive penalties by the Chiefs. This was the first time also since Super Bowl 57 against the Eagles that the Chiefs defense allowed 30 points in a game, and the Bills played a great one overall. Well, now the Chiefs have Charles Omenihu back on the D-line to bolster the pass rush, which hopefully helps them get to Josh Allen at least a couple of times. But more importantly, they also now have cornerback 2 Jalen Watson back in the secondary. That is huge and should help massively against the Bills' pass game because honestly, the secondary got abused week 11. On the flip side, though, Allen will now have Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman back in this one, as well as their right tackle. Though, to be fair about the pass catchers, neither of them lit up the box score against the Ravens. The main 2 guys for Allen recently have been Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. But again, I just want to point that out when comparing who's back for the defense as well as Buffalo's offense. If we flip sides, the Bills again were down Matt Milano and Balin Spector for what that's worth, but they were still able to shut Kelce down. He only had 2 catches for 8 yards. Linebacker Terrell Bernard did a great job against Kelce when lined up against him, and they basically did all they could in their defensive game plan to take Kelce away. Well, watching Kelce catch 7 passes for like 117 yards in the divisional round probably means they're going to do all they can to focus and take him away once again. Outside of Kelce in week 11, though, the leaders on the day were Xavier Worthy, DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Watson, and Noah Gray, who had 2 of the team's 3 touchdowns. I do want to point out, though, that Kelce has typically been a completely different animal against Buffalo in the playoffs. In 3 games played against him in the Mahomes and Allen era, Kelce has averaged 8.7 catches for 96.3 yards and 1.7 touchdowns. Combine that with the fact that he's now had 14 consecutive playoff games with 70 or more receiving yards, and Buffalo could once again find themselves in trouble. They have to deal with a Kelce that's performing like that and their wide receiver room. But hey, let's just say that they do handle Kelce again in this one, especially with Milano back and then Bernard doing his thing like they did in week 11 initially. Let's say they shut Kelce down. Well, that's where I think KC's biggest advantage of the entire game could come into play, and that is with their wide receiver room. DeAndre Hopkins is much more acclimated into the offense. Worthy has continued to increase his role, averaging around 5 catches for 50 yards a game since the Bills game. But then, on top of that, Hollywood Brown is back in this offense, a big piece they did not have in week 11. And here's where things get very interesting. The Bills secondary got a bit banged up in the divisional round win over the Ravens. Safety Taron Johnson injured his shoulder, and while he most likely plays, he might be in a brace and won't be 100% out there. Then safety Taylor Rapp hurt his hip and had to leave the game on a cart, I believe, with his status currently being day-to-day. I'm not sure he plays, to be honest with you. And then, if that wasn't enough, cornerback Christian Benford is currently in the concussion protocol. He could clear it by Sunday's game, but we aren't sure just yet if that's going to happen or not. So that's 3 players injured or banged up who played all 38 snaps in coverage against the Chiefs' last matchup. A Chiefs team that, again, had no Hollywood Brown, and that's why I think this game might live or die by the wide receivers in this one. And with the secondary as banged up as it is, the Chiefs have a definite advantage here. And that's not even to mention how great Patrick Mahomes is in conference championship games, minus a horrible second half against the Bengals where he threw his only 2 picks in an AFC championship, of course, but still. In these games, though, Mahomes is 4-2, losing both times in overtime, but averages just over 300 total yards, 2.5 total touchdowns, and has a 109.8 passer rating in these games. Combine that with Joe Tooney at left tackle rather than Wanya Morris, and then Jalen Watson back in KC's secondary, and home field advantage at Arrowhead in the playoffs. And honestly, I really think the Chiefs have a pretty decent chance at winning this one, maybe even by more than one score. That remains to be seen. Every time we think they could pull that off, it ends up being down to the wire in a 1, 2, or 3-point win. But again, I think they do have a pretty good chance at beating the Buffalo Bills for the 4th time in a row in the playoffs. That is not going to be easy, though. In fact, it's never actually been done. This is a pretty wild stat here, but look at this. No quarterback has ever beaten another quarterback 4 straight times in the playoffs. Also, when these two teams play each other, it's basically been a coin toss. Over the last 10 games played, these two teams are 5-5, and this is pretty much unbelievable. Scriptwriters going insane here. But in those 10 games, both teams have scored and allowed exactly 251 points. I'm not sure how the heck that happens, but it's safe to say when these two teams play each other, the result is basically a coin flip. And that's where I want to get your initial thoughts on this game. How are you feeling about it? And do you think the Chiefs will be able to exploit the Bills' semi-banged up secondary with their wide receiver room, especially with the return of Hollywood Brown? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?